Hello and welcome back to Kathy's Africa, where we talk about unlocking Africa's business potential and helping you build wealth as an entrepreneur. Donald Trump has frozen aid to Africa. Some are concerned and others are looking at the way forward. For years, African governments have relied on foreign aid to fund some healthcare, infrastructure, and economic projects. But now that this money is no longer flowing, or at least frozen for now, what does it mean for Africa's future? Is this a crisis or a turning point for Africa? Instead of depending on foreign aid, Africa can now focus on self-reliance, industrialization, and trade within the continent. As 1 Corinthians 4:17 says, "For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory." Let us see something good out of this crisis. It's time for the giant to wake up to her rightful place on the world stage. Time for Africa and Africans to realize what they actually offer the world. Our resources is the backbone of all Western economies. According to The Economist, as the rest of the world ages, young Africans are becoming more important. This is just a slight affliction, and if managed well, could be the beginning of real economic independence. In this video, we will discuss why frozen aid or possible lack of aid might actually be good for Africa, how Africans, especially the diaspora, can turn this into a wealth-building opportunity, how we can grow intra-African trade to benefit everyone on the continent. Let's dive in. For decades, foreign aid has kept Africa dependent rather than helping it to grow. So this new development could be a blessing in disguise. First, it will push Africa towards self-reliance. Many African governments rely on aid money instead of creating sustainable economic policies. With aid frozen, African nations must find ways to generate revenue, invest in industries, and support their people without relying or depending on external help. Foreign aid often brings in free or subsidized goods, making it hard for local businesses to compete. With this aid also comes restrictions or dictates on what must be done with our economy if we want aid or loans. Now, African farmers, manufacturers, and entrepreneurs have a better chance to grow without external interference. Also, a large portion of aid never reaches the people. It gets lost in corruption or gets diverted to serve other agendas. Recently, it has been reported that US aid was used to fund Boko Haram. With less aid, governments will have no choice but to manage their economies more responsibly. By reducing dependency, this freeze could force Africa to focus on real long-term economic solutions. Foreign aid is frozen, but Africa still has abundant resources, talent, a young and vibrant population, and a growing economy. Now it's time to build wealth through investment, entrepreneurship, and trade. Invest in African businesses and industries. Instead of waiting for aid, Africans, especially those in the diaspora, can invest in startups and local enterprises to create jobs, fund entrepreneurs on the continent in key sectors like agriculture, tech, and real estate. Nigeria's booming fintech industry is thriving without foreign aid. Why not support similar innovations across the continent? Africa has fertile land, yet it still imports a lot of food. Now it's time to invest in small, medium, or large-scale farming and food processing. Start small, grow organically, and then expand. Just start something. The agriculture value chain is a long one. Choose a section of it and start a business. As President Mahama of Ghana said, it's an opportunity for Africans to increase food production. We also need to support African-owned agribusinesses that add value to raw materials. Look for ways to add value to all the resources we currently produce. For example, subsidized frozen chicken is imported or exported to Africa on such a large scale that it undermines local poultry farmers. We need to encourage local food production for African markets instead of relying on imports. Instead of just selling cocoa beans, for example, Ghana should be manufacturing its own premium chocolate brands and exporting them worldwide. Use our shea butter to produce cosmetics suitable for our complexion. The possibilities are endless. Take a walk in your community. What are their needs? Which one can you solve by starting a business? We import too many products that could be made locally, and we should also move away from this mentality that foreign goods are the best. Our government should also support local businesses by looking at imports that undermine local produce and products. With aid frozen, African countries must produce more goods for themselves. The diaspora can invest in factories that manufacture essential products like clothing, furniture, electronics, and building materials, and especially food and mineral processing. Each industry has a value chain. Choose a section of this chain and become a key player. Support the Made in Africa movement by buying local products. Not just produce them, but make a deliberate decision to patronize them as well. We need supply chains that allow African businesses to distribute goods within the continent. With less foreign funding, governments will seek private investors to build roads, ports, and energy and manufacturing projects. This is a major business opportunity. Currently, it's not easy to travel between countries within Africa, even when you decide to fly. Private-public partnerships can start addressing these issues to enable goods to move freely and at less cost. The diaspora can invest in African real estate, roads, and commercial property. Support logistics companies that transport goods across Africa. Fund cargo businesses that help Africa trade within itself. The Dangote refinery in Nigeria, funded by private African investment, is reducing Africa's reliance on imported fuel. Kantanka is also leading Ghana in the production and assembly of local cars. Governments must support and encourage these local businesses and educate their citizens to patronize these locally produced vehicles and other goods. The mindsets of Africans need to be awakened. No one can do it better for us than ourselves. A strong financial system is key to economic growth without aid. The diaspora can invest in African banks, microfinance, and fintech companies. Our leaders must provide the enabling environment for businesses to thrive. Too many fees and levies hinder startups to grow organically. Support mobile money and digital finance startups that provide financial services to millions who are underserved by the major banks. We need government policies that support entrepreneurship and investment. Ghana has now proposed to drop the e-levy, which is a drain on businesses and individuals alike. In short, governments must first think of its citizens and implement policies to their benefit. Kenya's M-Pesa changed Africa's banking industry. What's the next big financial innovation? It's about time Africa develops its own international payment system. Instead of relying solely on Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, with its associated fees on every transaction. All these fees can be retained on the continent if we have our own payment system. One of the biggest benefits of this aid freeze is that it will push African countries to trade more with each other instead of depending on external donors. With less aid, African countries must rely on their own markets to grow. The African Continental Free Trade Area will allow African businesses to sell goods to a market of over 1.5 billion people. Instead of importing from Europe and Asia, African nations must source materials and products, first from neighboring countries. This will strengthen African businesses and create millions of new jobs. If Africa produces more of its own goods, prices will go down and more Africans will afford quality products. This will reduce reliance on expensive imports and keep money circulating within the continent. For example, instead of importing textiles from China, African nations can expand their own traditional fabric industries and export within the region. There is a video circulating of the Chinese producing the Ghanaian traditional kente fabric. There must be checks and balances as we seek to grow. This, for instance, if it's not produced in Ghana, we should insist that it should not be called kente. Our culture must be preserved. The irony is, they are not producing it for themselves to use, but to sell back to us. Our governments must implement regulations to preserve our culture and industries. We need to protect and preserve what makes us Africans. By trading with each other, African nations will become stronger and wealthier as a continent. If we fail to take action and do nothing, we risk becoming even more dependent on China and other foreign powers. We will have weak economies that will struggle to function without handouts. We are likely to also lose control over our resources, while outsiders profit from them. But if we act now, Africa can build a strong, independent economy that benefits Africans first. Donald Trump freezing aid may seem like bad news, but it's actually an opportunity for Africa to take control of its own destiny. Now is the time for Africans, especially the diaspora, to invest in local businesses and industries, support African-made products and services, create jobs, build wealth, and strengthen trade within Africa. This is the moment for Africa to rise, not as a dependent continent, but as an economic powerhouse. The question is, will we take advantage of this opportunity or wait for another foreign power to save us? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kathy Base Africa for more insights on Africa and wealth creation. Until our paths cross again, may your endeavors be as bright as the African sun.